have a gift.
It was.
So I'm going to call our meeting to order. Today is December 12th, 2017. This is a regular business meeting of the North Kingstown School Department, School Committee. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Healy, if you could call the roll, please.
Mrs. Blossom?
Here.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. McGovern? Ms. Stevens? Mrs. Shaw?
Here.
And Student Representative.
Here. Okay, we have 3 members, so we have a quorum. If you could please call the calendar.
December 22nd through January 1st will be the holiday recess. The schools are closed. Friday, December 22nd is Christmas Eve observed and offices are closed. Monday, December 25th, Christmas Day, offices are closed. Monday, January 1st, New Year's Day, and offices are closed. And Tuesday, January 9th, 2018, there'll be a school committee business meeting.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to apologize for my voice. I have a nasty cold, and if I cough, I apologize for that as well. But I can get through things. So first on our agenda, we have our presentations and recognitions. Dr. Ajay?
Sure. I know Dr. Humbert has on to get us started tonight.
And this is Jesse Broder. Mrs. Anderson, am I saying his name correctly? Broder? And he was recognized by Artsonia. Is that correct? Yes. So fifth grader, right? Third grade. Mrs. Anderson is here from Quinnesset, and he is a student in her class, and his art teacher is Danielle Singh.
And we have a couple. I have a couple. Brian Garapi, who teaches at Forest Park and is also our girls volleyball coach. He is the named Division I Coach of the Year since we last met. If you haven't seen the video for our own Quicken Loan hometown hero, cross-country coach Paul Tatro, you need to see that. It is about the most inspiring thing. I'm very proud that he is a North Kingstown skipper because he represents us so well. Also, congratulations to our boys football team. I think everybody knows this at this point, but they won their first Super Bowl championship with a perfect season this year. So congratulations to them. And also to their kicker, Noah Iden, who got a lot of publicity for raising money for cancer research with his kicking. And he raised over $6,000 this season, so a lot of great things happening. And speaking of great things happening, we have 2 representatives from the North Kingstown High School PTSO who are going to let you know about the grant, the Champlain Grant, that they were able to help us acquire. I noticed that several people from the high school here are, Mr. Powell is here, Dr. Morse is here, Dr. Mansiri, all were very instrumental in putting this grant together. So I'd like them to talk a little bit about what this means, and hopefully we can move that item up on the agenda.
So first of all, my name is Tracy Wilkinson. I'm the treasurer of the PTSO, and this is Debbie Gotthelf. She's the vice president. Mr. Powell is the head of the science department at the high school.
So, excuse me. So we're fortunate enough to apply for a grant to expand the engineering program at the high school, and we are lucky enough to receive this grant from the Champlain. What we're going to be proposing to do with the grant is we're going to be expanding our facilities and creating a brainstorming room within the engineering program as a whole, as well as producing a larger build room, which will encompass the entire STEAM program at the high school.
So the grant was for $99,310. and it's split between infrastructure of about 59.5, the classroom equipment at 15.5, and technology at about 24,000. The process itself was actually quite rigorous because apart from sending the application in on a single sheet, we had a visit from 2 of the foundation people, and they did a panel interview with a number of us, and then walked around the school and had a look at it. I think the hardest bit though was the waiting, without a doubt. So, we're very excited. Does anybody have any questions?
I'd like to just say something, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Denise Manseri, I'm the principal of high school. I would like to thank Deb and Tracy and Rick, because without them, we would not have the patio that we have in the back of the school, and now with this grant. And, you know, at the high school, I think you all know that we try so hard to make sure we're always improving our program. And there was just not one moment left. And the 2 of them asked, what do you need? And we told them, and they magically appeared and did a wonderful job. And I think your background in finance and your tenacity that with everything that you do helped us, and then Rick to make sure that all of the numbers were correct and everything we're going to be doing. And also Janice from our art department is always doing something with STEAM, so to bring these 2 together and to make sure that we're not forgetting about the A and the STEM, and so that everything is being done. And that's really why I think that Champlain was so favorable, that was PTSO and it was STEAM.
We were the first PTSO in the state to apply. No one has ever applied, parents, to this grant, so we were honored to receive it.
We were pretty excited.
Congratulations.
So now there is a little matter of process. Sorry, you guys. First of all, thank you so much. It's unbelievable.
No, thank you for your help too.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
So the grant was given to the PTSO. So the process now is you either accept the donation of the monies or we submit invoices to them, and I need to know how you want all that process to work if there's anything over $5,000. Because there's that tricky little nuance there of once the money's in my hot little hands, I have to do RFPs, I have to do all kinds of other stuff, and you guys have to approve things. So I need to know how you guys want to handle that, because it's very odd, I think. And she said it, the only PTO ever. I think it's kind of odd that they actually granted it in the manner that they granted it. Terrific, but odd.
Yes.
Yeah, so they actually granted it to us, and they made the check out to the PTSO.
Yeah.
And all the reporting stuff seems to have come. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, Mary. Like
you guys are going to have to do all the reporting.
yeah, I'm not.
Yes.
I'm in
Yeah,
charge of the
and
council.
I know you're not,
Don't have a
we're
problem
going to be
with
doing
that.
that together anyway, but
Yeah.
that's why it's
You're
just,
gonna go through yourself
it's kind of
with the
strange.
contractor.
Yes.
I can tell you how I would like to handle it,
How would you?
but I'm not entirely sure that you'll be comfortable with it. I would just like for even the invoices to go through them.
Would it make sense for us just to accept the physical donations?
Well, but I think
There's
once
work,
you do that, it's
right?
money in my hands.
No, instead of the money, the actual just equipment. Like when we get a playground equipment. Wouldn't that be, they're essentially doing all the work
Well,
and,
you can do that after.
yes.
After the
Wouldn't that make more
fact.
sense?
So sort of like a report out after the fact, it's all done, and this is what you did with it, and we're accepting it, so now it's our responsibility, it's our insurance and all that. Are
Worst
you
case
guys
is-
comfortable with that?
I don't have a problem with it.
So the invoices will get paid by you guys and all
Yeah,
that?
because you guys are going to have to put it out to tender and
Yes, for
and manage the
contractors,
process.
and we have a timeline that we had to
You
give them
do.
to.
Right.
So.
So are you guys
Mr.
comfortable with
Powell's
that?
aware
Because
of
I'm
that.
very comfortable with that. Knowing that, Mr. Powell and Dr. Mansiri are going to be
And I really
involved.
don't have
and-
a problem handling the money side, because
Right.
I'm a chartered accountant in the UK, so I've been doing this
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of stuff for like
It's UK guys.
30 years. Yeah, we invented it,
So if you guys are okay with that, we'll come back at some point. I guess we're thinking maybe 3 months, 2-3 months when it's all done.
Yeah,
and-
I guess that the Champlain reporting deadlines are December, so you have to report on how you spent the money each December. I think it's 31st, but it might be the 1st.
Yeah.
You have to double check the paperwork. but I'm guessing without looking that they'll want it broken down by, wages paid, products bought, etc., etc.
Well, there are no wages, are there? It's just.
Well, the contractors.
Oh, yeah,
That's the
gotcha. But no employees, right.
Yeah.
So we can do that in a few months when everything's done. We'll do a report back out. You guys will accept the whole kit and caboodle.
That different than with the Stony Lane Playground.
It
for
really isn't.
example.
You're right.
You
I
know,
hadn't thought about it
it's
that
a
way.
donation of a piece of equipment
That
that
we
was
then-
installed, that
Yeah.
we've given them permission to install,
Right.
but yet we're not doing.
Right, and then we take responsibility, insurance coverage for it. I'll work with the trust on, whatever it is. It's mostly equipment, so that's great.
So does that mean we table this for tonight?
Do we, I mean, the
Yeah.
formal approval, we would. I mean, it's
You
not
would.
that we're not approving what you're doing.
Right.
We all are in approval of what you're doing. It's just
It's all apart.
the formal acceptance of the donation would come later. And, we
But we can
always,
still deposit.
yes.
Yeah.
And-
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and because we're telling you that I don't think we need to take a formal vote on it because we're not accepting it, but we would be hearing from someone at this table right now if there were objections to the project, which there weren't. So, it just really comes down to a matter of process and procedure, and, Mrs. King will work with you on, the details of what we need to do for our paperwork-wise and managing. And on behalf of everyone here, I want to thank you for the initiative that you've shown, and not just the results. It's amazing and a wonderful thing that you've done for all the students at the high school. So I personally would like to thank you. I think everybody here would agree. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much. For our next presentation this evening, I would like to invite Dr. Kim Carson, Dr. Mansiri, Mrs. Seitler from Fishing Cove, and Ms. Logan from Davisville Middle School. And I've set up some seats for them at the front table here. I'd like this to be tonight a discussion about a very important, set of issues that we're dealing with here in North Kingstown. And I mentioned this, if any of you happen to have seen or been at last night's meeting with the town council. I consider, how well we are dealing with social and emotional learning issues, behavioral support issues for our kids to be, a real priority item. And I know members of the school committee do as well. It's even been identified as one of our goals, of something that we feel needs to be addressed better than we're doing so right now. So I've asked Dr. Carson to kind of do an overview of where we are right now and the vision of where we would like to be, and then asking the principals and Dr. Carson to kind of talk about their experience from each level of the district and really get a better detail than what I would be able to do about their experiences in this area and what they feel that they need.
Thank you. An important topic. I think I've been talking about social emotional issues and behavior since I started here in North Kingstown School Department. While I was going over this presentation, it was very interesting because NBC Nightly News is actually doing a series this week on the generation at risk, Americans' youngest facing a mental health crisis. So it's just not North Kingstown, it's something that's happening across our nation. Some of these statistics from that report is that we are showing that depression is worsening in teens, and that we are seeing kids as young as 2 years old suffering from diagnosable depression. So we are having certainly a crisis in our nation at this time. One of the things that Rhode Island has been doing is they have actually just adopted, the Board of Education, a set of social emotional learning standards. They passed those in November of 2017. So even the Rhode Island Board of Education feels that this is an important topic for all of us in Rhode Island. There are 5 areas that they are asking districts to kind of look at. The areas include self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. When we look at mental health, I think it's important to kind of look at what it is. It's our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, We hear lots of kids, particularly at the high school level, and even at the elementary and middle levels, talking about stress, the stress and anxiety that they feel on a daily basis. It's how we relate to others and make choices. It's important in every stage of our development, from childhood through adolescence, through adulthood. So, I think it's one of often the last things that we pay attention to. We're busy looking at our Common Core state standards around academics, but we need to pay attention even to these social emotional standards. We know it's important, but sometimes in our day-to-day goings on, we don't look at that piece. When we look at mental health trends, we know that current research talks about the serious depression. The suicide rate among young girls in the United States reached a 40-year high in 2015. That's the most latest statistics out of the CDC. So we know that there is an issue. 1 in 5 children living in Rhode Island have a diagnosable mental health problem. Rhode Island has the 8th highest suicide attempt rate of children in the U.S. 22% of all American youth have a diagnosable mental illness, and with a very serious impairment before they turn 18. And I think the district's done a nice job in starting to look at that with our Davisville Academy and some other supports that we do have in place. The median age of mental health disorders, including anxiety, ADHD, and behavior disorders, mood disorders, and substance abuse, is actually between ages 6 and 16, which are critical ages within our school population. 1 in 68 children, 1 in 42 for boys, and 1 in 189 for girls are actually diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. More youth in the United States die from suicide than from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, etc., according to the CDC. There are over 3,470 suicide attempts every day by children in grades 9 through 12 in the United States. One of the things when we look at the CDC reports is that mental health disorders in schools are on the rise. They've been talking about that, and I think as a nation we're beginning to look at that more and more. That more than 1 in 5 children have a mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder, with prevalence varying across the country, depending on the states, according to the CDC. That's kind of a very interesting statistic, because that would say that an estimated 5 students in every classroom may be struggling with some sort of depression, just like adults, either anxiety, ADHD, or other mental health issues. I mean, if only 5 of the students in a classroom have these mental health problems, that can be a huge burden for the classroom teacher. Nearly 80% of children and teens are in need of mental health treatment, do not receive it across the nation. Rhode Island has a definite deficit in the amount of mental health services that we are able to provide for children at this time, with very few practitioners in the state. When we look at some of the self-reports, and this kind of is, I want to explain this slide a little bit. It's talking about favorable responses, but in this particular survey works question, favorable responses are those students that actually report feeling anxious or having anxiety-type symptoms, that they're self-reporting. When we look at these favorable responses of feeling anxious in their school day, North Kingstown has slightly more than 50% of our elementary students and slightly more than 40% of our students in grades 6 through 12 that endorse feeling anxious on an at least weekly to daily basis. When we look at our self-reports of students who have signs of depression in the high school or feel suicidal at some point in time, we have about 25% of our students at the high school reporting symptoms of depression and 10% endorsing suicidal thoughts. And that's from the most current Rhode Island Kids Count Facebook of 2017. So that's a very new and real statistic for our kids. Looking at those, and I'm not sure if there's an overlap between kids who may say they feel depressed and those who may feel suicidal, but we're talking anywhere between 140 to 300 students at our high school who have endorsed feeling depressed or suicidal. When we look at students who are hospitalized for mental health disorders, there was 1,275 Rhode Island children under the age of 17 that were serviced at Bradley or Butler, and that's only 2 of the 3 hospitals that currently treat youth with mental health disorders. 66 6 students in North Kingstown were hospitalized at Bradley or Rhode Island Hospital due to psychiatric or substance abuse concerns in 2014. That is the most recent statistics that I could find. When I asked our mental health staff across our district, we've had 7 elementary hospitalizations from mental health issues that we know of, 8 at the middle school and 6 at the high school, and that was as of December 1st. When we look at the type of programming that we do have a clinical psychologist who works full-time, and I am going to speak a little bit about what she does on a daily basis. That's a very unique and important position for the school district. I only know of at least 2 other school districts who have a full-time clinical psychologist, and we are keeping her very busy between our Davisville Academy and our kids out in the district. We have social workers and psychologists within the district, guidance counselors at the middle and high school. We have a single behavior specialist and a behavior specialist assistant for the whole district. We have student assistance counselors that we contract with. We have a central clinical team consultation where the behavior specialist, myself, social workers, and the clinical psychologist sit and try to do case conferences with schools to help folks manage students with mental health disorders. And we do provide some outside consultation, particularly in the area of autism spectrum disorder. Some of the program we have is the central clinical team that I spoke of. We have room 202 at North Kingstown High School, and I know Denise will talk a little bit about that program and how many students are accessing that and for a variety of reasons. And we have our clinical day program at the Davisville Academy. Our clinical psychologist to date has done 14 or is in the process of completing at least 14 evaluations for looking at students for mental health disorders and diagnoses for those students who are at the Davisville Academy. She has done 17 student observations. This was as December 1st for students, including those reviewing files and attending meetings to work with staff and families around students. She's done 15 observations or consultations just at the DA alone, in addition to the 17 she's done in the district. She does weekly team meetings at the Davisville Academy. She does 5 to 10 hours a week doing additional consultation at the Davisville Academy and other classroom and academic settings for staff, and she does crisis management. She does 4 hours every other week for the central clinical team, which includes students across the district, plus 2 hours after working with parents, other family members, and community resources. In addition, we have school psychologists, and I will talk about the numbers of staff that we have across the district. Our school psychologists work as part of our response to intervention teams, our evaluation teams, our IEP teams. They provide individual and group counseling. They do evaluations, both cognitive and behavioral. They at times do functional behavioral assessments. They work with discipline and manifestation determinations for students with IEPs. They provide crisis management, mandatory reporting under Rhode Island law, social skills groups, teacher consultation, and communication with community providers. Our social workers do very similar roles, working with our response intervention teams, our evaluation teams, our IEP teams, providing individual group counseling, evaluations in the form of social histories, mandatory reporting, social skills, teacher consultation, and communication with community providers. In the 16-17 school year to date, our school psychologist has completed 38 cognitive evaluations, for the entire school year. That was last year. She's done 17 to date so far. So we really have a lot of things going on with kids within our district. In addition, we have a behavior specialist and a behavior specialist assistant. The team works across the district to provide behavioral supports and interventions through the RTI process or through an IEP. They collect data to help develop behavior plans and complete FPAs. The behavior specialist sits on the central clinical team. She also provides all of our crisis prevention intervention, or what might be known as restraint training for the district. So she actually does the refresher courses and the initial courses for all of our TAs. Last year, the 16-17 school year, the team completed 24 functional behavioral assessments. To date, for the 17-18 school year, they've already done 7. programming. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, because we're doing a lot of work in this area.
So one of the things that we wanted to be proactive with our social and emotional learning. So one of the programs that we began several years ago was the Open Circle program. It's research-based, and it's approved by CASEL. This was actually started by two of our principals who had gone to a conference, and it was a principal at Hamilton Elementary and Stony Lane. And they began sending their staff members for training. And after a couple of years of doing that, we decided to make it a district-wide initiative, because we were looking at other programs too, Responsive Classroom and a few others, and decided that we wanted to have consistency across the district. So the Open Circle program has a meeting. It's a 15-minute meeting twice a week, and the students have an open chair, and when you go through, you are invited to join if you want to. And the areas of social emotional learning that Dr. Carson pointed out at the beginning, those are the areas that the program it concentrates on, obviously, with a particular emphasis on problem-solving skills. And so we went ahead and trained the teachers from the other three schools, elementary schools, who were behind, so we wanted to catch them up. We trained quite a few people. It's a 4-day training, so it was extensive. And then we also trained the specialists and the teaching assistants. At the time, all teaching assistants at the elementary level were trained in this program. So that training and the specialist training is a 1-day training. And we were able to do it on our professional development days. So that worked out well. And so now a couple of the schools are in sustainability, have sustainability teams, and the other schools are still sending staff members to be trained. So we have everybody will be complete. On the right side of the slide, you see the efforts at DMS. I don't know, Ruth, are you going to be speaking about this a little bit more, or should I?
I can if there are any questions.
Okay. So Ruth Ann and Marissa have led efforts at this school. They've had a devoted faculty meeting time as well as a full professional development day, and they will be doing the full professional development day in February too. And this program is what it says, teaching nonviolence, and so it's working out problems and mediation, and having the students learn the skills, and obviously the faculty, so that they can coach and lead in that area. Then we also had, after the Open Circle and the work at DMS, we have the Healthy School Initiative. That was the Rhode Island Department of Health grant. One of the programs that we had was Playworks, which teaches the students how to interact on the playground. It has some organized sports activities, and we had several TAs that were trained, some through grants, which was great, and then we had some additional training too. We have a fitness grant program going on, K through 12, and that was sponsored by the Department of Health as well. Then we've been in a 5-year, we're just finishing up with this grant. This is a Healthy School Initiative, and this is actually from the Healthy Youth Initiative is actually from, it says Rhode Island Department of Health, but I think I made a mistake here. This is actually from the CDC. And most of it is based on LGBTQ issues. And so that is one of the intentions of the grant. So in 2014 and 2015, we had a respect workshop. Several of us went to that. That was on preventing health risks and promoting healthy outcomes among lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning students. And then at the end of that, our students presented from the high school. It was very powerful. Then the following year, we did the Becoming Visible with the high school faculty, and this was done by Rachel Legend, and that was designed to answer questions and provide positive, inclusive, and best practices while respecting the varying levels of comfort on the staff. and their experience. And once again, our students also presented, and that was very powerful as well. Then 2016-17, so starting last year, there were several more things. These are student workshops. We had creating safer spaces. This was Kara Mansour, and she did, this was on helping students build awareness of the wide diversity of gender and sexual identities and how discrimination can negatively affect the social and physical health of the victims. The Healthy Relationships, Teen Dating Violence, and Sexual Assault and Consent. That was a 4 full days of programming for students at the high school level. And then in 2017-2018, this is the new activities for this year. The grant is about to be approved. I don't anticipate that there'll be any problems with the approval. And first of all is the staff training for the PE and health staff at the high school level, and that's for done by Planned Parenthood, and it's an evidence-based sex education which provides digital tools based on science that support healthy decision making. Then we have Sex and Gender 101, and that addresses the nuances of gender, sexual orientation, and sex assigned at birth. Then we have the LGBTQ inclusion in the classroom. This one is for the high school staff, and this talks about engaging the parts of our brain that puts people in boxes and builds the skills to recognize when it is happening, and changes in language to more effectively engage students. So that will be a very interesting one. The Dynamics of Sexual Assault is for the PE and health staff, and that is to understand the different types of sexual assault, myths related to sexual assault, offender tactics, victim barriers, and how to support victims. And then there's a parent presentation in caregivers and parents. This is by Planned Parenthood, and it's called Real Life, Real Talk. And it builds skills around sexuality and sexual health so that they feel comfortable imparting developmentally and medically appropriate information to their children. And finally, the last one is the dating violence. This is going to be presented by Ann Burke from the Lindsay Ann Burke Foundation. Some of you may know Ann is, her daughter was murdered in a domestic violence occurrence several years ago. And so she is going to do an in-school assembly for 11th and 12th graders addressing the topics of dating violence, including the warning signs, the power and control wheel, and how to get help.
Thank you. Additional professional development that we have offered across the district over the past few years was we actually were able to provide mental health first aid for all our TAs, our mental health staff, and our nurses. Day one came in and did a in-service training with the faculty at DMS on human trafficking, and also we were able to include our psychologists and social workers within that training. We have ongoing crisis prevention intervention training and refresher courses yearly. Before the beginning of the school year, we were able to have a full professional development day for Knesset Elementary School on the effects of poverty, childhood mental illness, and multi-tiered systems of support to begin looking at how to have school-wide programming for the students there. We have had suicide prevention training, and just this past professional development day, we had refresher training for all our mental health professionals and our nursing staff. We have ongoing informational nights for the community, including we've had Choose Love, Suicide Prevention, Childhood Anxiety, which was sponsored by the Special Education Parent Advisory, and social media was also part of that presentation, looking at how that can provide anxiety or other issues for students on social media. We have provided various mental health topics for our teaching assistants over the years, and Dr. Helton, who is our clinical psychologist, provides ongoing PD at every professional development day for our social workers and psychologists, doing case reviews, crisis intervention, talking about mental health for those folks. When we look at our staffing, we currently district-wide have a full-time clinical psychologist who works both in the district and at the Davisville Academy Clinical Day Program, and a behavior specialist and behavior specialist assistant who works again across the district. At the elementary level, we have 2.5 social workers across 5 elementary schools, which may sound like a lot, but 1 social worker is dedicated full-time to Quinnesset because it is a split funding between us, general funds, and Title I. So she's doing truancy work for her Title I monies. So it really is less than 0.5 per school. We have 3 school psychologists across our 5 elementary schools. That's less than half a person per school. The middle school and high school has 1 social worker for the 2 middle schools and 1 high school. That's a third of a person to support 3 of our largest schools. And 2 school psychologists for the 2 middle schools and 1 high school. We have a full-time psychologist at the high school, and the other psychologist splits her time between the 2 middle schools. When we look at that staffing pattern, and I know Dr. Auger shared this yesterday at Town Council, when we look at the numbers, we looked at Johnston with their population of 3,100. They have 7 social workers and 4 school psychologists for about a ratio of 1 mental health staff per 281 students. When you go down further, we have Portsmouth, who has 4 social workers, 4 psychologists. Again, that's like 1 in 3 to 325. South Kingstown, our neighbors right down the road, has a school, student population, of 3,000 with 4 social workers and 5.3 school psychologists. When you look at North Kingstown with an average student population of around 4,000, we have 3.5 social workers and 5 school psychologists for the entire district, with a ratio of 1 mental health staff for every 470 students, which to me kind of shows a dramatic difference between the other districts and ourselves when it comes to staffing. One of the other pieces that have been added to our school social workers, psychologists, and our building administrators is a mandatory reporting law in the state of Rhode Island. We have a mandatory reporting law which requires reporting of any suspected child abuse. Given the very nature of the school psychologist and social workers' job, they are often the person that such information is reported to by a child. They must then follow the district policy of reporting, which includes our building principals. To date, the elementary schools alone have made 28 Rhode Island child calls, so those are DCYF calls for suspected abuse. I then would like to open the floor to the 3 building principals to talk a little bit about their views at the elementary, middle, and secondary level.
You want to come on up to the table? When Dr. Carson and I were putting this together, we felt it would be important just to kind of give the principals a chance to talk about, their experiences. I know they have a lot of discussions with me and with Dr. Carson about, the level of staffing they have, the kinds of issues that they're faced with, and how well or not so well they're able to deal with them. And I think it's important for all of you to hear from them directly about, the kinds of things that occur. It's easy to kind of talk about statistics. I think it lends a different lens on this to hear about experiences. So, if anyone particularly would like to start.
The majority of the focus of this is more towards the middle high school, but the time during my tenure at Fishing Cove, the population has drastically changed. The way the school is configured has changed. The students from K to 5 who are currently at Davisville Academy were at Fishing Cove for the first 3 years. At that time, we had about 40 preschool children. We now have about 135, which will probably reach about 150 by the end of the year. So we've shifted to Davisville Academy, many of the students, but our younger and younger students are having more and more difficulty. One of the areas that presented itself over the last few years is anxiety and depression, as Dr. Carson spoke of. It's an area that many of our teachers have not been trained in. and it has become a hot topic at the RIAS convention. Our speakers that we've had in, the teachers are asking for supports because many of those symptoms go underneath. It's hard to determine, is that behavior due to typical things we all grew up with, or is it an anxiety? And we are spending increasing amounts of time addressing the DC YF calls, addressing what is a call, what isn't a call, and right now it's a real gray area. It's taking far more time than it ever has for staffing in the schools. We have spent a lot of time on the open circle, as Dr. Humberg talked about. Every person at Fishing Cove has been trained in almost all of the other schools. It is making a huge difference in how our students communicate with each other. The other part that makes a huge difference is right now all TAs in the district are trained in CPI. When I started at Fishing Cove, we began to do the entire school because it makes such a big difference in how students interact with each other, and how staff are far more sophisticated in how they can bring the level down and diffuse the student rather than having it elevate to a crisis situation. Any questions as far as elementary goes?
I think my thing is my big push is elementary. I do feel a lot of it goes to middle and high school, which is understandable, but I feel like things start in the elementary school, and unless they're taking care of my personal experience with a child with anxiety in the schools who's not identified or IEP'd or has, I mean, we take care of it outside, but has anxiety in the 3rd grade and the pressures of Common Core and everything that goes with it, that I feel like our district is severely lacking in the supports for teachers at the elementary school level, which then carries on into the middle school and high school with behaviors and whether they're identified and how they're dealt with and where they go, and having behavior specialists that also have a focus on language is really important to me, not just a BCBA, but really focus on that language component at the elementary school level is a real big push of mine.
So yeah, I guess, what do you feel like is your biggest challenge, or what do you think that you need in order to help resolve some of the issues at your school?
I would say
in the perfect world, what is it?
In the perfect world right now, the social worker is split across Davisville Academy, the preschool, and then Fishing Cove K-5. School psychologist is split across Stony Lane, Fishing Cove, and preschool. So that's our specific situation, but then the other 2 elementary schools have far less because Clinton-Nassett has a full-time person. But then at the middle school, high school, it's even more extreme because you've got 3 very huge schools with 1 person. So it's sort of like we're stretching and stretching and stretching. And if you were to shadow our school psychologists and our social workers, you would be running as fast as you can every day, all the time. And then you're trying to, at the same time, deal with homeless families, families in crisis. Yeah, it's, so we're really not around the edges. Yeah. Right now, all the teachers at Fishing Cove, we have 2 families in crisis. There's a Google Doc, and right now everybody's signing up what they're going to do, what they're going to make sure is at Fishing Cove by Friday. That's what the social worker and school psychologist, myself, are making sure it gets done. That's not part of this anxiety part, or the real social emotional that we're talking about. So every time you see your social worker and school psychologist, give them a big hug because it's a huge job.
Yeah.
And then for behavioral supports in the schools, like I just find that, you know, we have behaviors that are unidentified, and whether or not it's the families that don't want them identified or they're just not being identified, whether they're on the spectrum or social emotional or where they're coming from or what they are, that we don't have that support from a behavior person being able to come in and help teachers diffuse it without having to have an IEP or, you know, I mean, my goal would be to have a behavior person at each elementary school that can just go into a classroom and help. I mean, that's my perfect world, is, you know, having, you know, stand-up desks for everybody or a seat that's not sedentary if that's what a child needs because they need some movement in their life. So, I mean, that's my perfect world. And whether or not that helps at the elementary level.
So currently we have a behavior specialist and then we have an assistant that covers the entire district. And to be perfectly honest with you, in my former district, we didn't have any of that, so I sort of felt like I died and went to heaven when I came to North Kingstown. But if you're talking perfect world, I would love to see North Kingstown have a similar model that we have for the occupational therapist. We have an occupational therapist, and then we have co-eds that service the building. So we could have a strong behavior therapist and then co-ed, or similar, but I don't know what you would call those people.
PSAs, yep.
That service the schools. We are very thankful for the ones we have. But in your perfect world, we must be getting a landful of money to do that. So.
And I have to agree with Karen because when you have one person stretched across all of the schools trying to provide behavior supports, it becomes just crisis to crisis, and they're running probably 3 times as fast as the folks who are in our buildings trying to support kids.
The other components of all these positions is multiple days a week they spend in meetings. So that's enough. That sort of doesn't go.
Even if you have them,
right, you're in a meeting.
2.5 days a week or 3 days a week, 1 day is earmarked. It's just a revolving door of 504 meetings and IEPs. They're off the grid. There's a crisis. It's like, can you wait 5 minutes? You know, we're in the middle of a meeting. You can't do that. You have to leave the meeting, then you have to wait, postpone, have a meeting at another time. They're very busy. You know, one of the slides that Dr. Carson shared with you said, you know, what are the needs? And you asked that question, and one of the first things I think listed was professional development. And even though we're always talking that, you know, through the years, budget cuts have really drastically reduced the amount of funds that are available for professional development. And unfortunately, it is tied to money because you need substitutes or you need consultants to pay, you know, so that's an issue. But for me, it's not even the professional development. It's really the expertise of a social worker and a school psychologist, because they're trained, the classroom teachers are trying to teach academics, and you know, if a child comes up with a concern about you know, an at-risk behavior, or you know, they detect something on the child that looks suspicious, they send that child to a guidance counselor, or a school psychologist, or a social worker. Well, like our school at Davisville is the second largest school. We have 560 students, and we have one full-time guidance counselor. That's the only full-time support staff that's there. I have a half-time guidance counselor, so that person isn't there all the time. I have a half of a social worker, or not even, a third of a social worker, and I have a half of a school psychologist. And you know, I'm in the parking lot with the family for an hour trying to get a child out of a car, and I'm trying to call the social worker who's at the high school to please go follow up with the family because the child won't come out of the car. And the psychologist should be trying to counsel this child, not me. I don't mind doing it, but I've got a million other people looking. And it's just, you know, we really need the support staff because the students and families need help. They need a lot of support and help mentally, and it's rising all the time. The increase of amount of students that come with self-harm statements and issues, and it's incredible. And now with the DCYF reporting, they're asking principals to report with somebody. And often a school psychologist would be the first one that someone might reveal something to, or a guidance counselor, and they'll come and then they need to sit with us and be reporting out. And, you know, we did get a little clarity around that because that's just become almost, you know, it really has. So we're working on that. But, yeah, we need staff. We really need staff.
So, hi. So first of all, I'd like to thank you because you created a calendar this year that allowed our freshmen to come in by themselves on the first day of school. And they were able to meet all their teachers and to walk around the building in a very safe space without having all the other, 1,000 students breathing down their neck. And so that was a lovely first day. I think really what I'm most worried about is my the adults too in my building, the social worker, who literally looks at me and says he's scared to leave because he doesn't know how he's going to finish that and then run to Ruth Ann's building and do that. So when he tells me he's scared, I know it's way worse than it normally is. So that, and I would love to introduce you to Cindy Zito, who is here in the back. Again, she runs our room 202, which Dr. Carson alluded to before. I don't know how she does it, but we have two things going on in that room. We have behavioral. It's the positive alternative to suspension, out-of-school suspension. That's from 6 to 12. So people can come from the middle schools, and they can come up there, and it's a regular-sized classroom. It's not a really big room. It's a classroom. And then also we have people returning from the hospitalizations, and they come into that classroom. So you have very fragile children next to children that should not be in there at that time, but really that's the only spot. And then there's Cindy, who is able to diffuse and hopefully get to the student what they need. We have a TA in there currently with her. And so what that program is really doing is providing a safe space for a myriad of reasons. Students also, before they get into a lot of trouble, can ask to be referred to room 202. And they work there with Cindy again on how to get back out. So we have green passes, or we work with the school psychologist, school social worker, and we try to figure out, like, what does that child need? It's everybody in the room knows we had a suicide not this year, last year. It was a year ago and this fall. And so since we've been doing that, it's like everybody's on the highest alert. But we've been asking for the last 5 years. It's not new to us that this social emotional is going on. We've been methodically having, thank goodness for the money that we did get from the Rhode Island Department of Health and also from the CDC, because we've been able to leverage different types of professional development among all of our staff. But even still, they're number one, they're worried. I don't know how else to say it. Is the people, adults in my building, are very, very worried, and all roads lead to Rome. We have 1,400 kids there. There's not one building that is better than another building in this district. Everybody is holding on by a thread, and it is really the phenomenal faculty that's holding it on, and everyone's listening. There's not one of you, I don't think, that wants to help us. It's just, I don't know where the money's going to come from. But that, ideally, in that perfect world situation, I would, at the very least, have a full-time social worker so that Matt didn't have to leave the building. He could actually follow up, because we talk about how much time. One student can blow up the entire day, and the other 1,399 don't have access to anything. And also, to get a full-time, right now we have a TA in with Cindy, but to have a larger room, like in my head, we have the room picked out. If we could get another adult, another teacher in there, so that way they could be working, somebody can work on social emotional, the other person can be working on behavioral, and they can then branch out. So he's going to be going into different success academies and piloting the Choose Love curriculum that we had, the woman that was hosted here. So we're going, we're doing it. Whether we get it or not, we're going to make it happen the best that we can do. But what we can't do is we can't go out to the communities and the houses and have like a family night there. They're just stretched so thin that I can't do it. I mean, you can ask Joe. I would say this, Joe, you can speak to this, okay? But even our AP students are, right, he will do it, he's fabulous, but I'll tell you, like right now we're going to be coming up to, we just had our, first quarter report cards came out, we just had our seniors are doing their applications. We have high level students that everybody thinks has it all together, and they do not have it all together. So we're not just talking about the students that you would think about in your head if you had a bias towards who's going to be in that room. We have it across the board, and kids are asking, can I drop my APs? Can I drop this? And we have rules, like there's certain things, like and as much as the guidance counselors tried to tell them at the beginning, hey, you know what, 5 AP classes is too much.
You know, you probably don't want that. You know, maybe one or two. I mean, they're considered college classes, and not even college students are taking 5 classes a semester. So it's a lot, and then you add in all the other opportunities, and there's, you know, sports and work and everything else. They're going to crack. And so what we really need is to, under, you know, Dr. Carson's guidance, is to bring in a few specialists, have them provide what we should be doing for the district, and then everybody follow it. And that's really, but Joe, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's all the students. It's not just those that are struggling, especially AP honor students. Same deal. So I absolutely agree with that.
They actually did speak to most of what the needs were, and you do have the slide in front of you. But what I'd like to say is, at the minimum, adding a school social worker to the high school would allow us to move then that position down so that there at least would be a half-time at each of the middle schools. So it would at least increase that much.
Minimal.
That's the minimum of what I could ask them, because I could ask, I mean, they spoke better than I can for what the needs are, but at least that would kind of give the high school whole, because I really do worry about the high school and the minimal mental health staff that they have. I think the suicide last year was very telling. I spent, I think, the whole week at the high school with the faculty and the students and the mental health staff, and a lot of the social workers and psychologists from the elementary and middle schools came to help with that and were there for the week. And everyone else, you know, everyone just stepped up to the plate to really work with the high school on that very difficult incident. But you could just see there wasn't, if we didn't have those people and the other principals who said, yep, go, take care of that, I don't know how we would have even have dealt with that crisis, given the minimal mental health staff that we do have at the high school. I see it at the middle schools also. I think moving it to a half-time social worker is better. It's not ideal. And then looking at how we resource our folks at the elementaries. I do think we need behavior specialists across the board to help. That there's no way one behavior specialist can do enough to help our students, and really they truly are. And it's not just North Kingstown, it is a national trend with mental health crises.
Are there grants out there that we can find folks to help us push, or are there, I mean, just because it is the hot topic, and with, I mean, looking at the behavioral specialists and the number of autism related disorders that are in the elementary schools, I'm just curious.
Right. Well, right now, the behavior specialist and the behavioral specialist assistant are funded through my IDEA funds, and part of one of our social workers is through the Title I funding. We're able to do that at Quinnesset because it's a title school. Our clinical psychologist is also coming out of those IDEA funds. I don't know how much there would be for staffing. There may be grants out there that would provide some of the support and professional development, but I do definitely have to echo what the folks here at the table are saying, that if we don't have the staff, we can do a lot of training, and we'll put it together, and we'll do our best for our kids, but I think that staffing would be harder to be grant funded.
In the beginning of the presentation, you said that Rhode Island has a deficit in resources. Are you talking just about staffing specifically, or are there other resources?
Our community resources in the area of mental health. We currently, our psychologists and social workers, if there's a child who is self-harming or has suicidal ideations or thoughts, or homicidal ideation, we call a hotline through Bradley Hospital. Sometimes those kids can't be seen for 2 to 3 days because there's not the community mental health supports for children. Rhode Island as a state identifies that as an issue, and they have gotten some grants and some things that they're doing to work with that. There has been some grant funding in the state, but it's one program that works with our kids who have ASD, autism spectrum disorder. So it's just very limited resources. So even if we have a child in crisis, we're often dealing with a lot of what's happening for them because there's not a lot of community support out there either.
And I thought that we were supposed to have someone here from the
we actually do. So if you folks are good for the moment.
Yeah. Chance was talking with Cindy Elder today from NAMI. So have we used their
From where?
resources?
Yeah.
I mean, they were in Campton Smithfield High School for days. So I said, wow, it sounds like something we could do since it's free to the district.
So what was on the sorry?
It's the National Alliance of I'll get it wrong. It's NAMI, Rhode Island.
I have a card right here.
Yeah.
So
The National Alliance of Mental Illness.
she seemed like
I
the
got to read the
programs were very useful and free. So I was hoping if we had
We'll call tomorrow.
So as you mentioned, the first person on our citizens' comments list is Mr. Jeffrey Hill from the Round Department of Health. So while you folks are sitting here, if Mr. Hill, if you could come up and
Come to the podium.
yeah. That'd be great, thanks.
I didn't prepare any formal remarks, but so the Department of Health has a suicide prevention program, which is funded through SAMHSA, the federal grant. And so part of our effort has been to address children's mental health needs. We're not the Children's Mental Health Authority in the state, but we are working towards trying to address children's mental health needs, especially in schools. So part of our work is we do fund the suicide prevention work provided through Rhode Island Student Assistance Services. So each of the schools that has a student assistance counselor, that the suicide prevention part of that is funded through our program. And so we've been paying ISAS for probably 7 or 8 years to do that work in Rhode Island schools. I know that Kingstown has been one of the districts that's been doing that. And if you've taken advantage of the silent suicide program that we made available for middle and high schools, we fund that through our CDC grants in our program. And so, and that's provided through student assistance as well to help provide technical assistance in implementing those programs. And we also have a break prevention grant that we fund through Day One to provide sexual violence programs in schools. It's called Your Voice Review. I'm not sure if North Kingstown participates in that, but there are some that do. But yeah, suicide, there have been 34 that have been age of 18 since 2008. Rhode Island has lost suicide. And so it's not nothing. It's a scary thing. So part of our effort, especially in Washington County, has been focused with the South County Health Equity Zone, South County Healthy Bodies, Healthy Minds. And so some of you may be familiar with that work. It's led with the Washington County Coalition for Children. The work, especially the mental health first aid training that I know North Kingstown has participated in. And so we're continuing that work. We're actually continuing to help fund the mental health first aid training through Healthy Bodies, Healthy Minds. They've expanded that URI for college students as well. So that's still available as an option. And I think I think Bradley is going to offer mental health first aid training up to 100 spots for training that they'll pay for in the near future. In terms of that, they're also looking at expanding the Kids Like Hotline, which we also fund through this grant. Is the expansion of the Kids Like Hotline, which provides schools with an opportunity to call Kids Like for those appointments. We started off really strong. We've had over 250, actually probably closer to 300 students in the state that have not had to go to the emergency room. And instead, we get an appointment at a community mental health center through Bradley Access without having to go to the emergency room. Trying to reduce the numbers that are going to emergency rooms. I think just today, as of this afternoon, there were 20 kids that had already gone to Afro ED for psychiatric reasons. And we're seeing at the scene. And it's not a good experience, I think, for kids to go to the emergency room. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to work on, is trying to reduce the number of kids going to the emergency room because it's not a great place for them. But, yeah.
Just to piggyback on that, this is what happens. They'll end it, the student might end up in an emergency room, and they might get some assistance, but then in a day or two, they're back at the school building. And we need to embrace them and support them, and there's no one to communicate what to do. You know, if your school psychologist isn't there the day they come back, we try to, set up a meeting, but there has to be a support network. And so often they're so fragile, they get released within a day or two sometimes, and they come right back to school. and there's no real plan of how to support them. And if you have a plan, you can't implement it because there's not enough people to help you implement it.
However, we have found that service useful of calling
Very.
in and getting support as to what to do and setting up appointments so families get into services quicker rather than being an emergency call. So that has been very useful.
And there are plans to expand. the
That's
use of
really
that.
helpful.
And Washington County is really one of our expansion areas, given that there aren't a lot of supports for children's behavioral health in Washington County. There's, there are no hospitals down here. I mean, Bradley's the only hospital. Well, Bradley's the only psychiatric hospital in New England for children. So I think that's not necessarily always. It's a good thing for us, but not necessarily good for. But there are other pediatricians now have access to the pediatric. It's called PPRN through Bradley, but pediatricians can now access psychiatric referrals here too. So there's another avenue related to that. So if you're working, if the school staff are working with a student's pediatrician in some ways, in between medication management, those kinds of things, there are avenues where the pediatrician can call and have a consultation, typically sometimes within 30 minutes, with a psychiatrist at Bradley for access. So the PPRN has been brought out to the primary care offices throughout the state. But I know that the Department of Education obviously has been looking at social emotional learning when they pass the standards, I believe. They're also looking at, they've been working with the Center for School Mental Health out of the University of Maryland in the SHAPE program. So there may be some opportunities. I think Knesset may have filled out a survey a couple of years ago related to SHAPE. But it might be an opportunity to look at SHAPE and how you can set up learning outcomes. It's a free tool. But they may be looking at doing some programming down the line. So it could be an opportunity to kind of map out the behavioral health needs in terms of the district and using that tool and getting technical assistance from that team related to that. And hopefully also maybe looking at Medicaid resources in terms of looking at other ways to use Medicaid students that are Medicaid, students that are on Medicaid, that right here that you can use for billing for extra services and offset some of the costs from the budget. Things for that, and using that in ways that you can. There are some districts, I think Providence has 6 mental health workers embedded in the schools that are from outside the district that are actually doing the appointments for the students at the school. So instead of a parent having to take time off of work, driving to the school, and then taking the student out of the school for that period of time, they're actually able to do those appointments at the school. That may not be ideal for every district. It's certainly time limited because you have your staff staying late, and there are always lots of concerns around that. There are some options that are starting to happen out of state.
Any questions for Mr.
I just want to thank Mr. Hill for coming here. Taking time out of a lot of stuff you have to do and the work you do at the DOH across the whole state. And I think one of the beneficial things we can just sort of see is at the state level, then you talk about obviously scarcity of resources, but the resources we have getting synergies and collaboration and awareness in some cases that these things are out there. And to the extent, we're not the only district facing these challenges, to the extent we can find ways of partnering. It's not always ideal to share resources, but other districts that have the same problems, we can find ways of sharing some resources better than nothing at all. But again, thank Jeff for coming down and providing some insights.
If anyone has ideas, they want to pass that information, or they just, we're always looking at what's next in terms of our work, and certainly want to make sure that we can try and work sustainability into any measure that we do. Because like anything, we don't want grant funding to end and then not have that service available. And so that's really what it was. So whatever, what we can do to help the district, certainly let us know. And we'll look into doing that. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Any other questions?
No, I just want to thank you all for the presentation and all the information, and just want to let you know that we are going to make it a priority, start with a priority 9. So we'll do whatever we can
our agenda, our citizens' comments, we have one more person who's signed up to speak, which is Jennifer Anderson. If you could please come to the microphone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are a couple people calling to speak as well.
Oh, okay, sure. So what I was going to say is, after, if there's anyone who has not signed up to speak, you can after you're done. We ask if you could please state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jessica Anderson, and I'm a third grade teacher at Quinnesset Elementary School. This is my 8th year at Quinnesset. I currently teach. I'm representing my colleagues who are concerned about the safety of our students. We understand that the school committee is looking to better support students with social and emotional needs throughout the district. We are here to inform you that our school has been working with our union and Dr. Auger to address our behavioral concerns. Some changes have been implemented to improve behavior and overall school climate. We have developed committees to focus on the different areas of need in our school. The many steps that we have taken to address our problems have led us to formally request to Dr. Auger a dean of students. While we appreciate Dr. Auger and his administration's efforts, we understand that this request may need to be formally made to the school committee sometime in the near future. We do appreciate your continued support and attention to our students' needs as we move forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wanted to speak who hasn't signed up? Yep, no, that's fine. Again, if you could just please state your name clearly and your address.
I'm Cindy Zito. I'm a teacher at North Kingston High School. You need my address?
We do, yeah. Sorry.
846 Curtis Corner Road, Wakefield, Rhode Island.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to thank my principal, Dr. Nansiri, and the other administrators for their comprehensive presentation regarding the importance of having a strong, dynamic, social-emotional program and support system in our district. And I would like to speak about my experience at the high school. Before I do that, though, I'd like to thank you also, Dr. Auger, because last night your comments at the town council meeting regarding Generation at Risk was so important. And I urge everyone in this room, if you haven't tuned in, tune in. Go online, watch Monday and Tuesdays, and tonight was at 6:30. I missed tonight. You can also watch it in the morning on MSNBC. It's riveting, so please watch if you can. As you know, anxiety and depression do not discriminate. I see students from advanced placement classes to students who struggle academically on a daily basis in my response intervention classroom. As stated earlier, I am an RTI teacher in room 202, and I also run the Positive Alternative School Suspension Program at the high school, which is a 6 through 12 program. Some of these students are coming out of hospital placement, and it's my job to transition them back to class. Some students express worry about family members who are struggling. Others come to me and don't know why they're feeling them. Once I meet a student who finds his or her way to my classroom, I immediately introduce that young person to our social worker or school psychologist. Sometimes Matt Hughes, our social worker, who is only with us until about 10 a.m., hasn't even taken off his coat yet, and I'm at his door with a student. This happened on 4 occasions last week, and this morning that's how I began my day. The urgency is real. We live in a messy world. Our young people are trying their best to navigate through difficult times. According to a 2016 Child Mind Institute research study, almost half of our young people will have a diagnosis of mental health related issue by the time they're 18. The most common is anxiety, and if we do not help our children, the long-term effects are devastating. There are too many examples of this day in and day out. Turn on the news, we know about school violence, we know about school shootings. Tomorrow is the anniversary of Sandy Hook. We had Scarlett Lewis come in, who was instrumental in creating a comprehensive social emotional learning curriculum, program, movement, whatever you want to call it, that's K through 12 and free, which I've just begun to pilot with another teacher in my building. We work very, very hard at North Kingstown High School to connect with our children. When students feel connected and supported and loved and helped through all of our efforts, all of us reap the benefits. A safe, loving, healthy school is the result. The benefits of having that strong social-emotional foundation lays the groundwork for academic and learning and responsible citizenship. At the high school, we need a full-time social worker to fully complete our multidisciplinary team approach to helping the students. In addition to everything that we do, I know in my classroom, I sit with students, I practice mindfulness, we do visual imagery, we do progressive muscle relaxation. My goal is always to get them back to class as soon as I can, and sometimes the reality is that I can't because they're too fragile. It's so important to the members of the school committee and to our administration that you really take a good look at trying to increase our social services at the high school and throughout the district. I am 100% behind athletics and music and all those wonderful programs that help everybody, but we're not going to have top-notch athletes and musicians and artists if we also can't help them, because it doesn't discriminate. I see varsity athletes, AP students, students who struggle, students with IEPs, and who don't have IEPs. So thank you for listening, and I hope that we can find a solution to this, but we desperately need a full-time social worker at our school. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak who didn't sign up? So next item on our agenda are our routine items. First of all, I need a motion to seal the executive session. Oh, we didn't have an executive session this evening, so we don't need to do that. And I can disclose that we did not have any votes because we didn't have an executive session. Next is the consent agenda. Any members have anything they would like to exempt from the consent agenda?
C1.
I think we're going to exempt all of C and just take those separately, so we can take care of that. Any others? I'm going to mention, because we need to table item E1. And anything else?
That's not consent.
Oh, it's not consent. I jumped too far. Never mind. Then ignore my E1. So if there are no others, if I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda items with the exception of item C.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is Huskin, second Mr. Jones. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, I think we can take them together because I think it's just some people missed meetings. If I could get a motion to approve items C1, 2, and 3. You're just, then we'll take them separately. All right, sorry. You can make the motion even if you abstain. But I have a motion to approve C1. I'll second it. All those in favor of approving item C1? Aye.
Abstain.
And any opposed? No. So it passes, and you abstain too, right?
Right.
Okay, so 2 abstentions, Ms. Hoskins and Mr. Jones. Yes. 2 yeses. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve C2 and C3.
Okay, and I'll second that motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstention, any opposed? So yeses, myself, Ms. Stevens, Mr. Jones, and an abstention from Ms. Hoskins. You get all that there? I'm sorry, I'm trying to do it slow enough.
No,
okay, good.
I think so.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
You can always watch the tape. So we have completed the consent agenda. Next, I'd ask for a motion to table item E1, because as our discussion before, we'll accept that once we get a little further along. So a motion and a second. All those in favor of tabling the item? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Yes.
Even though you have just approved the updated 5-year district technology plan, would you like to hear from our...
No, it's not part of consent.
No. We didn't get there yet.
It's
That's
number
G.
G.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
No
You're
worries.
Right. I thought it was part of consent.
That's
I
okay.
apologize, everybody.
So Mike was slipping out the back.
Someone tripped him, so he didn't get out.
Very.
Next, we have to appoint school committee members to our NKESP contract negotiating team. That contract is coming up for renewal. Being on that team would require that you be available for a number of meetings with the union throughout the process. I don't know what members are interested. I can tell you I can do it, but it can't be just me. Usually we have 2, don't we? Usually,
We do need to have
yeah.
2. We
have Sheila, she's not here.
I was just going to say that.
Price you pay for being absent, right?
Yeah, Greg and Sheila were, for the teachers. Were,
I mean, I thought that went well.
Yeah, I did too. The only thing that I would say is that while I hope that they're both back, December is when, sometimes we're doing the actual acceptance of the contract. I mean, we would love to have it done sooner. Realistically, that's probably not going to happen. So we just have to make sure we do keep mind of that. If it's you and Sheila, your terms are up. And we would have to make sure that we are moving forward quickly to get that completed, which is not going to be a problem for anybody. We want to get it done because we don't want to have an opportunity where if Greg and Sheila aren't back, then yeah, they're out, exactly.
So we come to it.
So, I mean, the only thing I would say is, there is something to be said for possibly having one member whose term is not expiring, just to ensure some continuity.
It's kind of what I was saying without saying it.
Will you?
I'll
Okay.
take one for this meeting.
All right. I think that's a good idea. Just, that way, we have continuity regardless. So, with that in mind, I don't want to make a motion because I'm on the list, but
I'll make a motion to.
I'll second it.
you didn't make a motion.
No.
You have to finish.
To appoint Ms. Stevens and Ms. Barger to the school committee representatives on the NK-ESP contract negotiation.
I'll second it.
There you go. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Now, Mr. Waterman, we have the school committee approval of the updated 5-year district technology plan. Do you want to speak briefly to that?
Certainly. So our outgoing plan was our initial plan, and I just want to highlight some of our accomplishments from that plan, and then talk about some of our goals moving forward, and then answer any questions that may be lingering. So our initial plan started and focused on extensive professional development. Some examples of that includes our technology educator, Ken Ramos. We've had annual technology-based summits, not just on the devices, but also on distance learning. We've put mobile devices, Chromebooks, into hands of all teachers and all students. These, as you all know, kids in grades 4 through 12 take them home. 1 through 3, they remain in the classrooms. And then we have iPads in about a 2-to-1 ratio in the kindergarten classrooms. We have Wi-Fi coverage throughout all of our buildings. We had 2 different phases of that project. Phase 1 focused on the classrooms. Phase 2 focused on other educational areas. So that was our cafeterias, our auditoriums, office areas. If there was instruction that happened, whether it be small group, we're able to add wireless coverage in those areas. And also technology staffing. We have made a few adjustments over the past 5 years to the staffing levels as far as job reclassifications and adding additional staff. With the addition of almost 5,000 devices, the additional staff is working very hard. Our goals moving forward are the integration of the ISTE standards for both students and educators. You'll notice the administrators are working, but that's because those standards are being addressed this year. They usually will look at 1 set of standards per year, so they're actually working on the administrative standards right now. We'd like to investigate adding a second technology educator, the embedding of digital citizenship into daily instruction. We want to continue to provide mobile devices to all students and staff, develop a student help desk program. Just last Friday, we received approval. I've been up here a few times talking about a fiber project. So we did receive approval and funding for that project, which is great news. It's less than a 50% approval rate. We had 3 levels of PIA reviews. Remember, PIA stands for Program Integrity Assurance, so that's your that's like your pre-audit.
That wasn't what I thought it said.
Yeah. Something else there.
I haven't received the check yet, so I'm going to leave it at Program Integrity Assurance.
Okay.
We want to look at a refresh of our computer hardware and interactive and non-interactive displays, and that can be projectors, Oculus boards. We need to start looking at updating and upgrading our wireless access points and switch infrastructure, and a refresh of our servers, virtual servers, and other backbone items.
Any questions from any of the members?
Well, I did have some questions. I don't know. And thank you for addressing the first round. I don't didn't get a chance on the second round, so if you did, I would ask them again. And I'd also like to get some input from our student rep on this as well. So one of my first questions, I think you mentioned about, I applaud the goal of integrating students into this component. And so I had a question, and that you answered about the formulation of the plan, but do we have student reps on the district technology committee?
Not currently, but it's something we can reach out to the high school and ask if they want to have their student government, whether it's the student senate, student council, I'm not sure the exact verbiage they use, about having a couple members come.
Yes,
So would that be something students would like to be interested in?
Absolutely.
I would like to amend the plan, or at least get a point that we will have students that are interested on that technology.
And I know you asked about quantity, how many. I would think a group of 2 to 3 would be good based off of the size of the committee. And also, I know kids in an all-adult audience may prefer to travel in a small pack.
Now my second point, I welcome as soon as we can to have the student help concept, and I would also love to see it as I don't know why we would say potentially, just a 4-credit class along the lines of like you've seen in Burlington High School and other places. Why would we need a 0.2 FTE to implement that?
So we did have that program last year as a 0.2 FTE. With the influx of students this year, the high school had to take that 0.2 FTE and use it elsewhere.
But what would be the rationale? Because it's an internship or it's a class?
It was an actual class. So
Okay.
there was a group of, the first session I want to say there was 5 students. The second session was between 7 and 8 students. And they would actually come from the high school on many days down to the D building, and they worked right in our work area. They worked directly with our technicians. Different days they would go over, this is how you replace a keyboard. This is, talking about the insides of computers, Chromebooks. So it was the educational component was getting them back and forth to the D building. We do have an internship program. I have an intern, but that's just a single student since the spring of last year. A different student.
Yeah, I'd love to see us how we can have the help desk students make that a 4-credit experience.
Can I just interject? I was just at a board meeting with RIDE last week, and we were looking at the information technology standards, and the help desk is one of the strands that we were developing standards for students to take as a full course. So I think we had a good start with it, but when we bring it back, it will be part of the budding information technology career strand that we have, and it will be one of the options for students to receive certain certifications when they go through the help desk program, based on the standards being developed by RIDE.
Good. So the digital citizenship curriculum, I mean, is that sort of the manifestation of how it will integrate across, or is that 2 separate?
So I know that we met with the media specialists last year, and they're working on embedding components of digital citizenship into the curriculum. But I think K to 12, it can be integrated everywhere. A lot of times it comes from the teachable moments.
Right.
It just happened when you talk about being responsible on the internet, your digital footprint. You hear digital citizenship, I think a lot of people automatically think of cyberbullying, but there's so much more than just cyberbullying.
So some of the teachers are actually implementing the common sense curriculum that I sent you. Well,
Okay.
responded
Yeah.
to you.
The point on, maybe I was confused, having non-school issued devices in the school?
So the guest Wi-Fi.
Well, not necessarily guest Wi-Fi, but also, you said students have their own personal, so that's separate from their own, or they were using them to replace the
They
student Chromebook?
They did not want a Chromebook, so they did not sign the Chromebook agreement. So I liken it a little bit to the first year of Park, last year being the first year of Chromebook. We had about 100 kids last year not out for a Chromebook and bring their own device. This year, and that number dwindled as the year went on. This year, it started off, and we're currently at about 25 kids. So it's something I think initially there was a little more kickback. Kids who had, a lot of times what I see in the MacBooks, kids who have MacBooks wanted to bring their MacBooks to school. But that is dwindling down. Now what we're doing, and I mentioned it in the email, is at the middle school and high school level, we are scaling back on the guest Wi-Fi. And it's not because we don't want kids to have internet access. It's a technological problem, and I'll give a quick overview of it, but I can certainly get more detailed if anybody wants to have that conversation. But basically, when a Chromebook hops to a network, it's going to go back to that network if it's available. The guest network, we've had to restrict the bandwidth on it because everybody at the high school has a phone, and a lot of them have another device plus a Chromebook. So our bandwidth, the speed of our internet was just, it was dying. It was collapsing. So we tightened that. But what happens is some kids have thought they can get around filtering or they can get around certain things by jumping to the guest network. However, the drawback to that is you lose printers. You are on a slow network. A lot of times when we go up to see kids in classrooms complaining of slow internet, the access point in the room is fine. They're on the wrong network. The downside to that is IT needs to physically put our hands on every device that's on the wrong network. It's about a 3 or 4 minute process we have to do to get them back on, and it's something we can avoid. So meeting with this, and this has been a conversation we've been having probably since the end of October, early November at the secondary level, about eliminating the guest Wi-Fi during the school day. We have got some feedback from the high school. I think it's a great idea. We're going to turn on, there are 3 access points in the cafeteria. We're going to turn on those access points for a guest Wi-Fi during lunch, so if kids do need access on their phones to play a game, because in talking to Dr. Minseri, that's kind of their time. It's their time to eat lunch, so they were comfortable with that. We can technologically make that happen. The other thing we'll do after hours, and we're going to go with 3 p.m. We'll turn on a guest network, so if there are any night events, if there are athletic events, we can turn that guest network on and not restrict the bandwidth, so that life can go on in the high school after hours.
So I'm just back to the Chromebook Mac. So we can't. Do students have to get approval to bring a non-Chromebook use, or we simply can't force students to take a Chromebook?
Correct. And I think by not making a big deal of it, I think some kids wanted to have that argument. It was just, well, if you don't have an agreement, you don't get a Chromebook. But the expectation is you still need to do A, B, and C. So there are some teachers right now who are, so if a teacher is using GoGuardian during this lesson, if they bring their own device, they're not viewable through GoGuardian. So the teacher can't push out resources. The teacher can't use some of those scenes to prevent kids from leaving certain websites during testing. They will send the child to the library so they can get a loaner Chromebook and then carry on. So this will also help alleviate some kids having to go leave class to go to the library to get a loaner Chromebook so that they can do what needs to be done during that class period.
So on my final point, which I don't, plan shouldn't be resource constrained, but it does need to be resource informed.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we just had a long presentation about other competing demands.
Mm-hmm.
What would the second instructional coach do? That, I mean, obviously, I can understand what the extra benefits would be, but what's the extra benefits for the costs that we're not doing now?
So we have Kim Ramos, who's very good at what she does. She does get stretched very thin. As you heard earlier, there's one of her for all of our schools. She does go in and work with teachers, implementing strategies, or especially as we move towards more blended and personalized learning, working with staff on how you implement that in the classroom. She does come from an elementary background, so I think having somebody with a secondary background might be able to relate to our middle and high school teachers. And when I say relate, I don't mean on a personal level, I mean on an instructional level.
Okay. I think, again, not related to the plan, but just the general point I think that Sheila brought up is at some point the plan is not executable if we don't figure out the authorization of the Chromebooks or whatever devices we will go to midstream in this plan.
And that was why I believe it is mobile devices, because we don't know in 2.5 years, Chromebooks may not be the best tool.
But thank you for all that. For everybody else, by the way.
Do you want to?
Yeah, we recently had a meeting for student union regarding all of this information, and we actually spoke to Dr. Manzieri about much of what he said. And it's important that the students know exactly what's going on, because many of us thought that they were totally getting rid of the guest Wi-Fi, which is actually not true, which we learned in the meeting. I'd just like to add that.
We'll rustle up a few students down the tech committee.
I think we're good. So we need, we didn't have a motion or anything, so we need a motion to approve, though you wanted to add.
Well, I would just
with
like
the stipulation
with or the understanding with the superintendent that he's okay with that, that we'll have student representation on that committee.
Okay. So I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the district's 5-year technology.
And I need a second. I'll give that to Ms. Stevens. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, for unfinished business, 2017-18 school budget. Anything to mention there?
Not this time.
For CIP, existing bond, future bond, I will just mention, we had our meeting last night with the North Kingstown Town Council, the statutorily required joint meeting. I think it was a pretty useful meeting, and that we had some good discussion. The presentation was made both by the town manager and the superintendent as to what our budget constraints and main drivers are going to be looking at, and part of that was a discussion of our plans for existing, not existing, but plans for future bonds. So we'll be looking to work with the town council in the future. Other than that, we don't have any new business. We just have 2 reports, which are a couple reports: disposal notification and the approval of disposal of the minibus. Any comments or questions regarding that? And
we can't ride that minibus anymore.
Off into the sunset.
Non-stripped apart.
You want to make us a deal, we can.
Yeah, exactly. And we couldn't even send that to Greg's
That
sister.
can make it into a little.
Yeah, we can't even send that to Greg's sister. We couldn't get it there.
Yeah, right. You'd be amazed what you can do with a bus. You can buy it, looks good as new. Don't kick the tire. And then we have a fiscal year 18 year-to-date financial report as well. Any questions regarding that? If not, we have reached the end of our agenda, and I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you folks for coming, and have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Long night.